and hide and go seek. After you get done counting, the man always say, if anyone's around my base, you're in. And you always have this one person that always be around the base every time. When we look at the phrase men and women of God, growing up, parents, we had parents, and my parents was very, very firm. When what mama said, that was it.
That's it.
And they used to always use this phrase all the time, Pastor Q, and say, I'm going to get you for old and new.
Yes,
and
sir.
we hoping and we praying that they will forget by the time we get home.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes they'll let it sit up and they'll let it build over time. And we hoping and praying that they will forget. It's just like in society. When you disobey the laws, you deal with the consequences. It's just like what the law says. If you disobey the law, if you disobey this, that's what be the consequences of it. You do the opposite of what they tell you not to do. It will lead to, jail time. It will lead to this and it will lead to that. It's just like in today's time. God tells us to do something. God gives us instructions, but we do the opposite of what God said do not do. Why is it, men and women of God, that we obey the laws of the land, but we do not obey what God tells us to do?
That's right.
Sometimes, men and women of God, we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful because we will mix the two. We will obey what they say outside, but then we get in the house of God, we don't obey nothing that God said do. Men and women of God, we have these things what we like to call terrible twos, and I have a 2-year-old as well. And they always find themselves getting their hands into something. And when they get their hands into something, you will tell them, don't do it again. They go right back and do the same thing that you told them not to do. So men and women of God, we have to be careful. That takes me back. It takes me back to our spiritual walk with God. God tells us something to do, and He tells us not to do it, and we go right back and do the same thing that He told us not to do. So men and women of God, you have to understand. You have to understand that in the Bible, 1 Samuel chapter 22, Samuel said, "Have the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice." When we look at the book of Numbers, men and women of God, men and women of God, the book of Numbers. Numbers is a very scared history of the Israelites. As they wandered into the wilderness, on a journey to get to the promised land. But the book of Numbers, that I find it very ironic, men and women of God, Numbers chapter 20, the Israelites was on their way on a journey with Moses. Moses was taking them to the promised land, but because of their disobedience, somebody would say because of their disobedience, it took an 11-day journey, 40 years to get there. So you have to be careful. You have to be careful. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, be careful. And obey God fully. So you have to be careful, men and women of God, because sometimes God will give you an assignment. God will give you something to do, and sometimes because of our disobedience, it will prolong the process. God told Moses, I'm going to allow you to take these people to the promised land. But because of their disobedience, because of them being stiff-necked, because of them complaining, it took an 11-day journey, 40 years. Exodus chapter 17, if I'm not mistaken, it says that God told Moses to strike the rock, and God told Moses to strike the rock, and Moses struck the rock, and water began to gush out in Exodus chapter 17. But when we go on to Numbers chapter 20, we understand in Numbers chapter 20, God told Moses to speak to the rock, and water will come out. But instead of Moses speaking to the rock, Moses struck the rock twice, and water began to come out. Water began to come out. So later on down the line in Numbers chapter 20, after that happened, God told Moses, because of your disobedience, you will not get these people to the promised land. Look at your neighbor and say, obey God fully.
Obey God fully.
Obey God fully. So Moses, men and women of God, Moses in Numbers chapter 20, God told Moses to take Aaron to the top of the mountain. And strip him of his clothes and watch him die. Because of their disobedience, he had to watch Aaron die. The first point is the Israelites, they rebelled against God and Moses several times in the book of Numbers. They complained about food. They complained about water. They complained that they'll be crushed by their enemies. They complained, and Moses also, they sent Moses death threats. The second point, the divine punishment. When the people complain, God hears them, and it doesn't sit well. The book of Numbers has stories of God killing rebellious Israelites with fire, plagues, and snakes. Sometimes Moses called to God for help, but the people turned on him. Sometimes God punished them directly. So you have to be careful with your mouth. Like the Bible says, the power of life and death lies in the power of the tongue. So you have to be careful what you speak about or say out of your mouth. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, obey God.
Obey God.
And divine provision, the third point is divine provision. Even though the people proved to be rebellious, God extended mercy to them. Rather than killing them off, the whole nation in the wilderness, he waited for the rebellious generation to die and preserve the young people. He continued to provide manna, the mysteries, bread from heaven, even when Prophet Balaam, the pagan prophet, from cursing the people. So you have to be prepared and you have to be ready in this next season of your life, men and women of God, to obey God fully. No matter what people say. One thing that I always say about this generation is that we will only do half of what God told us to do. We want to get saved halfway. And then we want to do the rest of the way. But I need somebody in here that understands with me and they can tell me and agree with me that saying this next season of my life, I'm going to obey God fully. Despite what people say, despite what people think, despite the consequences, despite how bad it looks, I'm going to obey God fully. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor,